Hey guys, welcome to the Nexoel Trading Hub YouTube channel. So we are going to be looking at the forecast for the coming trading week, what we are to expect and how we should likely possibly look out to execute our entries. So guys, let's start with the dollar index. This has always been the foundation upon which we base our analysis. So guys, when you look at the dollar index, when you check out the previous week review, and also the previous week forecast, you will see that price actually played out just the way we actually expected. So we expected a reaction last week from this weekly implied fair value gap for price to come mitigate this particular weekly breaker that sponsored the move to the downside that took out the low points. So we are actually aiming for the buy side liquidity in our dollar index pair. So what we are expecting to see this week is to see the possibility of price returning to this level, which is actually the 105.409 price level, before we possibly see the continuation to the upside. For price to come raid this particular buy side liquidity, or we see price drop to the 405.310 price level, which is actually the 50% of this week here, before we see the projection of price to the upside to come raid our buy side liquidity. So let's actually drop to the daily time frame to look at price delivery. So guys, here we are in the daily time frame. As you can see, this is our weekly implied fair value gap here. So what we actually saw is that we expected price to react at it, and then we see the fall of price to the downside, and then you can see we see this reaction where price took out this liquidity, and then you can see we see that's on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, price fell to the downside to come retest the weekly breaker block, which in confluence we can actually see this order flow here, this last sell move before the buy move that mitigated the weekly implied fair value gap. So now what we are anticipating is to see price come raid the buy side liquidity. So we can see here that now price for the push to the upside, and then we are having reaction at the mean threshold of the weekly implied fair value gap. So we are going to see this week the possibility of price falling to the downside to this particular level, just the way I've explained it in the weekly time frame, because you can see we have this fair value gap. Price moves to actually grab external range liquidity, return to fill up any form of imbalances, and then take out internal range liquidity. So now you can see this is actually liquidity resting here. So price would return to fill up the inefficiency resting here. So you can see we have this mitigation block in confluence to this fair value gap. So we could see the return of price to the downside, so that price would actually take out this daily low point here before we can see the projection of price to this level to come raid the buy side liquidity. So this is what we are expecting to see in the dollar index. So let's go to the 4-hour time frame. So you can see here we are actually in the 4-hour time frame. You can see how price neatly deliver within that zone, and then price took off. So what we are going to see is from the 4-hour time frame, we have this breakout block here, because you can see we have the fall of price. Price gave us this pullback, fell to the downside, price returned, fell further to the downside. Price took out this low points before we have the projection of price that violated this particular order block. And then you can see we have this fair value gap. So price returned, broke through this order block, and then took out the swing high. So we have this as an inverted fair value gap. So we are expecting to see price return, fill up this inefficiency, and possibly take out this sell side liquidity to come mitigate this particular level in confluence to this breakout block zone here. Because you can see we have this reaction of price at this breakout block, but price did not fall to the downside. Price broke through it. So this breakout block may reclaim price, and then we can see the projection of price further to the upside to come raid the buy side liquidity. So this is what we are expecting to see in the dollar index. So we're expecting to see further push of price to the downside, to come mitigate this breakout block, basically what we are seeing in the 4-hour time frame, or we could see a little weak of price to the downside just to mitigate this inverted fair value gap in the 4-hour time frame, and then we can see the projection of price to the upside. And if we actually draw our trend line, we could possibly see a confluence with that. So let's actually draw the trend line to see. So you can see where we draw our trend line, we can see that we have the possibility of a confluence here. So we could see price could just come, rebounds, retest the trend line, and then we can see the projection of price to the upside. So we can see this return, and then price gives us our move to the upside. So this is what I'm actually expecting to see, the DXY. So we're expecting to see the return of price to this level, take out this sell side liquidity, and then we see price project to the upside. So let's check the 1-hour time frame. So here we are in the 1-hour time frame. So we can see the same thing happening here. Let's actually also project by just considering to draw out a trend line here. So you can see price broke through this trend line. You can see the break of price to the upside. So we could see this return. Price may return, take out this sell side liquidity, and then we can see the push of price to the upside. So this is what we are expecting to see in the dollar index. So let's actually go to the GBPUSD, and you must understand that we actually check the reaction in the EURUSD, the GBPUSD in confluence to what is happening to the dollar index and all other USD pairs. So this is how we actually carry out more of an intermarket analysis to be able to have solid confluence in certain buyers we intend to see or establish in different currencies that are peer to the USD. So guys, let's actually look at the GBPUSD pair. So guys, we can see this is actually the weekly time frame for the GBPUSD pair, and you can see how price neatly delivered based on our last week forecast. So let's look at this coming week forecast. What you can see is now we have just the way we said last week. We're expecting to see reaction at this particular level here, and then we see price gives a rejection before we could further see the fall of price to this particular order block resting here. So first, our target is to see the reaction that price is going to make when price reaches this order block, fill up this fair value gap before we could possibly start considering this sell side liquidity. So since from the dollar index, we are expecting to see actually a bearish momentum before we could see the projection of price to the upside to take the buy side liquidity. What we are going to see then in the GBPUSD is we are going to experience the rise of price to the upside, and then when the dollar index is actually buying, then we expect to see the fall of price in the GBP here. What we are going to see is that we are facing the rejection here already. So this coming week, we should expect to see the possibility of price pushing to the upside. We want to have a bullish momentum by Monday, Tuesday to Wednesday, or just Monday and then Tuesday, where price pushes to the upside to this possible level, or we just see price react at the 50% of the candle body than the 50% of the entire candle, and then we see price falls to the downside. So let's drop to the daily time frame to look at price. Now, what you can see here in the daily time frame is last week, if you actually recall, we actually have an inverted fair value gap here in the weekly time frame. So actually, I just removed that so that we could have a clean chart. So now what we are going to expect is to see that price push to the upside. Now you can see this is the 50% of that entire weekly candle. And then you can see is in confluence to, let me pull out this line. And then you can see is in confluence to the 25% of this fair value gap. So we are expecting to see price pushes to the upside to come raid this daily high points before we could see price falls to the downside, And we are projecting to see price will fall from this level to this particular price level here, where we have this implied fair value gap. So this is where we are expecting to see the fall of price. And you can see that it's in confluence to the weekly inverted fair value gap, which I actually removed so that we could just have a clean chart here. So we're going to see price sweeps this high point, and then we see more delivery to the downside before we can consider the possibility of price sweeping this sell side liquidity. So let's check the 4-hour time frame for the GBPUSD pair. Now, here we are in the 4-hour time frame. So what you're going to see in the 4-hour time frame is that we have this level as a buy side liquidity. This should serve as an inducement. And then what you're going to see is that we have this particular breakout block here. So we have this breakout block resting here. So you can see we have the breakout block by this side, because you can see we have the pullback and then price pushed to the upside and swept this high point. And now you can see price return to the downside and broke this level. So now you can see we actually have price return after the break, because you can see we have the break of this low point here. Price took out that particular low point there. And then you can now see that this candle actually return to mitigate, and then we have the fall of price to the downside. But then this we can consider as a valid pullback, which is actually serving as a buy side liquidity inducement. So we are expecting to see when the dollar index is actually selling. So we're expecting to see price pushes to the upside to this level before we can see price further push to the downside to mitigate this level. And as you can see, we actually have an order block resting here that sponsored the move to the upside that took out this high point. So this is what we are going to be expecting in the GBPUSD pair, to see price sweeps this high points, and then we see the fall of price to the downside. Let's see if we're going to, let's actually apply the trend line and see what we're going to have here. Now you can see, let's project our trend line to the downside. Now you can see this is what we have in the GBPUSD when we project the trend line. So we are expecting to see reaction, and then we see price falls to the downside. So let's drop to the 1-hour time frame. So you can see here we have this buy side liquidity in the 1-hour time frame, just the way we marked out from the 4-hour time frame. So we should expect to see price possibly sweeps this high points, price return mitigates this level, and then we see price falls to the downside. So this is what we should be expecting to actually see in the charts when the market opens from Monday, Tuesday. We want to see this return, and then before we could experience the sell-off. So guys, let's actually look at the EURUSD pair. So guys, this is now the EURUSD pair. We're expecting to see the sweep of this sell side liquidity. You can see price neatly delivered in this particular zone here. We actually said we want to see price close below the mean threshold of this inverted fair value gap in the weekly time frame. That is what we are seeing here. You can see this price mitigated the 50% of these. Now you can see price dropped, and then we have a rejection, but closed below the mean threshold of this inverted fair value gap. So we actually projected to see reaction at this particular order block zone here. And then you can see how price neatly respected that. And then we have the fall of price to the downside. So we want to see price sweep this sell side liquidity. So what we are going to be expecting in the coming week is to see price push to the upside to the 25% of this level, or we see to the 50% of this level. And then we're going to see price continues the down movements. So let's go to the daily time frame. So guys, here we are in the daily time frame. And now you can see that we're expecting to see the rate of this daily sell side liquidity. And then we could further see price push to take out this extreme sell side liquidity. That's the weekly swing low points. So we're expecting to see that happens in the EURUSD pair, since we're expecting bullish momentum in the DXY. So what we're expecting now to see is that price returns to the upside to come mitigate this level, and then we see the fall of price to the downside. This is actually in confluence to the 25% marked out in the weekly time frame. But we could see the possibility of price actually going to rate this daily high point. So price may not really mitigate the 50%, but just weak little above the 25% of that weekly candle zone we marked out. When you look at it here in the daily time frame, because you can see this is where we have a form of price imbalance. So we could see that price could just reach this high point, and then we could see the continuation to the downside. So this is what we are going to be expecting, because you can also see we have a form of relatively equal lows resting below here. So price could also just continue the momentum to actually this weekly sell side liquidity once price read the daily sell side liquidity. So guys, let's actually drop to the 4-hour time frame to actually look at price more further. So we can see that this is now our 4-hour time frame. So we can see that relatively equal low points here. Liquidity is resting here actually. So we have sell side liquidity resting here. So we can see the reaction of price to the upside, and then we would see the fall of price to the downside. So we are going to expect to see that price possibly would actually weak this high point, take out this buy side liquidity before we would see the further push of price to the downside in our EURUSD pair. So this is what I'm expecting to see in EURUSD. So guys, let's check out the XAUUSD pair. That's our gold pair, to look at what price possibly would deliver in the coming week. So guys, let's head to the gold chart. So guys, this is actually the gold pair. We can see price took out the buy side liquidity. We're actually targeting to see price take out the sell side liquidity, because we have price filled up this form of inefficiency here with this particular candle, and then we can now see push of price. Price broke through this particular bullish candle. So we want to see that price actually gets to raid this sell side liquidity. So this is what we are going to be expecting in the gold pair. So let's check the daily time frame. So here we are in the daily time frame. As expected, we actually wanted to see price react at this particular candle here, because we have price swept this high points. Price reacted at this breaker. We're expecting to see the return to come fill up this inefficiency, mitigate this block, and then we can see price fall to the downside. Now you can see we have this sell side liquidity in the daily time frame, and then we have the weekly sell side liquidity, which we're expecting to see price would come raid. So we're going to expect that price would open, and then we see price pulls to the upside before we have the fall of price to the downside. So that is actually going to be seen in the 4-hour time frame and then the 1-hour time frame. So let's go to the 4-hour time frame. So here we are in the 4-hour time frame. So we can see this is actually that order block zone marked out within the daily time frame, where we're expecting to see price return to mitigate and fall. And then you can see in the 4-hour time frame is in confluence to this breakout block, because we have this pullback, and then price pushed to the upside and then took out this particular swing high point. You can see this massive displacement that we're expecting to see price come filled up. And then you can see the compression in price. This was experiencing compression here to the upside. So we can see the displacement and then this compression and then mitigation of the breakout block, and then we can see this massive displacement also. Now you can see we have this particular candle here, this order block that sponsored the push of price to the upside to come mitigate the H4 breakout zone. And then we can see that price broke through this order block. So this becomes more of our breakout, because this further sponsored the push of price. We have the sweep of this high points, and then now we can see price return and swept this particular order block to the downside. So we're expecting to see price return to the upside to come mitigate this zone, and then we can now see price continues to the downside. You can also see that when we draw our trend line in this 4-hour time frame, you can see we have it trending to the downside. So you can see we have trend going to the downside, though we see price broke through it, but then now price returned into it. So we could see this pullback, and then we can see the fall of price further to the downside. We can also see a form of resistance trend line here. We can also see a form of resistance trend line here. So what we can see is that price bounced off this and then broke through it. Now we see the return. Price bounced on it. You can see the bounce, price went through. Now you can see price retesting it. So we could just see price return to this upside to come mitigate this displacement, and then we see price further falls to the downside. Since what we are targeting is to see price sweep this sell side liquidity, and then the daily sell side liquidity resting here, we already have the rate of the buy side liquidity from a higher time frame, from the weekly time frame. So guys, let's check the 1-hour time frame. So here in the 1-hour time frame, you can also see the projection from the daily time frame is still what we are having in the 1-hour time frame. You can see we have a downtrend. So what you can see is this is the last sell move before the buy move to the upside. Price return broke through this institutional order flow. So we want to see this order flow reclaim price, and then we see price falls to the downside. So this is what we are expecting to see in the gold pair. So let's also check the USDJPY pair. So guys, here's the weekly time frame for our USDJPY pair. You can see price actually neatly delivered to the upside. So we're expecting to see price sweeps this buy side liquidity. But before that happens, we could see the possibility of price first pulling back to the downside before we can see the continuation to the upside. Price may find a form of support here before we can see the return of price to the upside. So let's go to the daily time frame to break price down. So here we are in the daily time frame for the USDJPY pair. So what I'm expecting is to see when the dollar index is actually selling, we want to see price falls to the downside in the USDJPY. We want to see price possibly mitigate the 50% of this fair value gap, or just slightly weak below this daily candle's weak point. That's Friday's candle. We want to see price take out the sell side liquidity resting there, and then we further see the projection of price to the upside to read the buy side liquidity. So let's jump to the 4-hour time frame. Now here we are in the 4-hour time frame, still the same projection. So we could just see price will take out this swing low, this sell side liquidity, which is now you can see this is the daily 50% fair value gap level. So we want to see the possibility of price actually taking out this sell side liquidity and then fill up this imbalance, and then we see the projection of price to the upside. So let's actually project a trend line to see what we could possibly see here. So now you can see what we projected the trend line here in the 4-hour time frame. You can see what we are seeing is the bounce of this, and then price continue the movement to the upside. So when we see this return, price may sweep this liquidity resting here before we see the push of price to the upside to come read the buy side liquidity. Let's go to the 1-hour time frame to see price more. Now you can see this is the 1-hour time frame. So what we can see is that also this 50% neatly is in confluence to this trend line here. So you could see the sweep of this sell side liquidity, and then we now see the projection of price to the upside. So possibly this is what we should expect in USDJPY. Or let me look at something here in the charts. We can see that actually in the 1-hour time frame, we have price swept this relatively equal low points here. Grab the liquidity is resting here. Price gave this order block, which is now serving as a breakout block. So either price sweeps this low, or we see the return of price to this level here. and then we see the projection to the upside. So guys, this is for the USDJPY pair, and this will be all for this first video in regards to the forecast for the coming week. So possibly I'm going to release another video to look at AUD USD, USD CHF, and other paired currency to the USD. So cheers guys, and God bless you all.